Why is Lewis such a figure that he's hard to nail down? He transcends categories, and yet people love him across the spectrum. What is it about Lewis that draws us in or draws people in, and why should we read him today?
Well, there's several things that happen there. One, he sticks with mere Christianity. So you can find people who are Orthodox, Catholic, Coptics, Protestants of all stripes, and they read him because at the core they have something that still allows them to be called Christian, whichever branch of the Christian faith they're in. And Lewis sticks to that core. He's not afraid to talk about the fringe, but he has a difference between what he says is a sure word versus opinion. And opinion is based on probability rather than certainty. It's subject to doubt, and reasonable people could differ over matters of opinion. Lewis doesn't fight over matters of opinion, but he holds a firm ground to mere Christianity. I think that's good. The other thing, too, is that Lewis said to a bunch of students in a lecture he gave called On the English Syllabus. It's published in the book called Rehabilitations, a Lewis book that nobody ever reads, but nevertheless, it's a good book. And in that, he said to the students, we have fulfilled our whole duty to you if we could help you see some given track of reality. We tend to be projective. We tend to project ourselves on our world, and we treat the world like a ventriloquist treats its dummy. We're basically uttering our own ideas through whatever it is we look at. Lewis says, no, you need to see this thing outside of yourself, the world outside of yourself, that you can grow into that world rather than atrophy into your own. And he has a line in his mature literary critical work called An Experiment Criticism, probably his last literary Discarded Image was his last one, but one of his last literary critical works. He says, in coming to understand anything, we must reject the facts as they are for us in favor of the facts as they are. So Lewis looks at the real world and he's describing it. And a person begins to see something of the robustness of that world, and they become interested in it, and they break out of the dungeon of self. Lewis helps us with that. Not only that, Lewis writes with such descriptive precision. He trained as a poet. He was not successful as a poet. I think his poetry is great. My academic friends don't think it's great, and they think that the fact that Lewis was rejected as a poet was a great thing because it drove him to prose, and we've all benefited by his prose. But I like his poetry. But nevertheless, he trained as a poet. A poet has to let each word count for more. You know, the narrative author can put together a paragraph to communicate an idea, and a poet will try and capture that same idea in a few words. And Lewis picks his words carefully. And there's little ambiguity with Lewis, and I think that's helpful. The other thing is he's such an imaginative author, so that even in books like Mere Christianity, he makes a propositional point and then he depicts it somehow imaginatively. And he said, the imaginative man in me is older, more continuously operative than the rational man. It's not that he's downplaying the rational side, but he loved the employment of the imagination. As a child, he was a lover of the myths. He was a lover of story, and he employs story, and he sees the value of story as well. So just to depict this a little bit, George MacDonald, an author who influenced Lewis, once said in his novel, Annals of a Quiet Neighborhood, we do not have souls. We are souls. We have bodies. You tell a child he has a soul, he thinks like anything else he has, his books, his keys, his lunch, whatever, that he could leave it behind. He thinks when he dies, he goes to the grave and his soul goes off someplace else. MacDonald says, no, tell the child he is a soul and he has a body. And when he dies, he goes to heaven and he leaves behind his body like clipped hair on a barbershop floor, for those who still go to barbershops, right?
Neither one of us.
I say, why should I have to pay as much as that other guy over there? The barber goes, it's finder's fee. We got to find it before we could clip it. So anyway, so what is the soul? And I think I could lay out proofs of the existence of the soul, the immaterial part of what it is to be human. I've read a lot of books on it and stuff like that. But basically, traditionally, we've said the soul, the immaterial part of us, has a thinking part, reason. It has a choosing part, volition, and it has a feeling part, the emotion. And even coming from an academic environment, I would suggest to you the reason is hands down the weakest of those three.
Mm.
If I make a bad choice, a bad decision, my reason doesn't kick in and say, Jerry, that's stupid. You follow that line, all you're going to do is hurt yourself and hurt people who care for you. No, my reason, being weak, is marshaled by my will to start making excuses and rationalizations for the bad choice. Lewis wrote, continued disobedience to conscience makes conscience blind. Aristotle put it this way, vice is unconscious of itself. He takes a word, akrasia. Krasia is the Greek word for command. Put the alpha negation, you lose command of your moral life if you make bad decisions and rationalize them. You lose moral clarity, you lose moral sight. And so basically, having made these excuses, Lewis says reason stands like almost a dragon sentry before my heart, keeping things from getting to that heart through its excuses and rationalizations. And Lewis says sometimes story gets past the watchful dragon. And so Lewis gains a hearing even in a skeptical world because of his use of the imaginative depictions in the stories that people who have resistance to anything to Christian faith will let down their guard, and all of a sudden they can begin to hear and see. And I think that's why he has such great appeal, because of these there's more reasons as well, but we'll stop there. I've been talking too long.